Ben Harris trudged down the crowded high school hallway. He never saw it coming. A foot shot out from the crowd, hooking his ankle and sending him crashing painfully onto the floor. Laughter burst around him. One of the loudest, cruelest voices belonged to Hunter, a tall, athletic junior who had made it his mission to torment Ben since middle school. "Watch your step, Tubby." Ben bit his lip to hold back a whimper. He refused to let them see him cry. Turning his face away from Hunter's triumphant grin, Ben's gaze flicked across the hall, where he caught sight of Emily, his older sister. For a split second, their eyes met. He hoped for the faintest sign of concern or solidarity. Instead, Emily's gaze snapped away. She laughed at something her friend said, as though Ben was invisible. Ben's cheeks burned red hot as he scrambled to gather his spilled belongings. He reached for his battered spiral notebook, only to have Hunter pin it beneath the heel of his sneaker. "Come on, fatty," Hunter mocked, "if you really want it." Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the laughter. "What's happening here?" It was Ashley, popular, confident, and cruel in her own right. For a fleeting moment, Ben felt a surge of hope, but as Ashley's eyes swept over him, she curled her lip in open disgust and took a step back. "Ugh, repulsive," she spat loudly. Ben was trapped by laughter and teasing. The crowd soon lost interest. As the onlookers dispersed, Ruby, a quiet girl from Ben's history class, knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" she whispered, handing him one of his textbooks. Ben managed a shaky nod, swallowing the anger and shame that churned inside him. Ruby looked around, and then leaned closer. "I forgot breakfast today. Forgot my lunch too." Ben understood her meaning instantly. He rifled through his backpack. He had bought her favorite sandwich earlier and quickly handed it to her. Ruby's eyes widened with relief and gratitude. The bell rang sharply. She pulled at Ben's sleeve, urging him to hurry so they wouldn't be late again. Still, the morning passed in a blur of hurt. Between periods, he half expected Hunter to corner him. He was too anxious to concentrate in class, jumping every time a whisper or passing snicker floated in his direction. When the lunch bell rang, fear sank heavy in Ben's stomach. Cafeteria time was always a gauntlet, the place where social hierarchies became painfully clear. He moved slowly through the lunch line, conscious of his limited money after buying Ruby's sandwich. With a meager tray containing the cheapest lunch items, he retreated to his usual isolated corner. Halfway through nibbling his sandwich, a shadow fell across the table. Hunter and his minions, Derek and Nick, loomed over him. Ben's throat tightened in fear. He had nowhere to run. Hunter snatched some fries from Ben's plate and held them disdainfully. "Should you really eat this, piggy? You've had enough for 3. Ben stared at the table, refusing to respond. Hunter's sneer darkened at the lack of reaction. He flipped Ben's tray in one swift motion, splattering milk and potatoes across Ben's shirt. The sound of a phone snapping a picture reached Ben's ears. Suddenly, another classmate, Lily, approached Ben, handing him napkins and quietly checking if he was okay. She gently wiped his shirt, but her kindness barely reached the emptiness in his chest. "It's okay," she whispered. "Just breathe." Ben felt tears threatening to escape. He inhaled sharply, forcing them back. Lily helped him clean up. He managed a small, grateful smile. "I'm all right, thanks." Lily gave his arm a brief, supportive squeeze. Then, with one last glance around the busy cafeteria, she turned to rejoin her friends. At least someone cares, he thought. When the final bell rang, relief washed over him, yet fear lurked beneath the relief. Hunter and his pack often prowled after school, looking for easy targets to shake down for money. And after all his forced generosity today, Ben had nothing left. He slipped out a side door and darted toward the sports field. Maybe he could escape, but no such luck. "Where are you sneaking off to, pig?" Panic seized Ben's heart. He bolted, heart pounding. Spotting a gap beneath the fence, he dove through, mud smearing his clothes. Hunter and the others shouted in frustration as they struggled to follow. Ben didn't stop. He ran until his lungs felt like they would combust. Only when their shouts died behind him did he dare slow down. He saw that he was halfway into the woods at the edge of his neighborhood. Students were warned never to enter these woods. People spoke of sinkholes and hidden wildlife. But for Ben, anything was safer than school bullies. Soon he found an old chain-link fence. The metal was rusted and twisted. Near the bottom was a small gap. Without stopping, he pushed through into a thicker part of the woods. The atmosphere changed immediately. Only the distant caw of a crow broke the silence. Yet he felt relief for leaving Hunter behind. Through a curtain of vines and decaying foliage, he spotted the outline of a structure, a small shrine or temple-like construction. Ben was curious. He pushed aside the wet branches and stepped into a small clearing. In the center stood a crumbling stone altar. She appeared sorrowful, exhausted, and emotionally raw. The events of the day came crashing over him. The humiliation, the fear, the laughter. Hot tears spilled down his cheeks. "Please," he whispered, "make it stop. I can't do this anymore." His words disappeared into the quiet woods. Feeling foolish, he bowed his head. Then, a soft wind blew through the clearing. Ben stopped and looked around, checking if someone was there. A faint, melodic whisper seemed to echo around him. So much sorrow, so much anger. It was impossible, of course, but it felt like the statue itself was speaking directly into his mind. Ben's left hand suddenly burned, a searing pain flaring across his palm. He yelped in shock, nearly dropping onto his backside. He forced his eyes open to see his palm. A dull red spiral glowed there, then faded into a jagged scar. Dazed, Ben closed his fist. When he looked again, the statue stood silent under the sky. Chilled to the bone and running on autopilot, Ben retraced his steps out of the woods. Hunter and his goons were likely gone by now. When Ben reached home, the house was cold and quiet. His parents traveled frequently for work, so it had become normal for Emily to manage the household, when she bothered to, anyway. He smelled something simple cooking, probably pasta sauce from a jar. Emily stood at the stove. She glanced over when she heard Ben enter, but her face was a mask of indifference. Ben removed his muddy shoes and sneaked upstairs to his room. The door clicked shut. He wanted to talk to someone about the bizarre experience. But who would believe him? He collapsed on his bed and drifted into a deep sleep, haunted by half-remembered voices that echoed around him in the darkness. Morning came too soon. For a moment, he believed everything was a dream, the shrine, the voice. But when he looked at his palm, he found a strange eye-like symbol tattooed there. He swallowed hard. It was real. In the kitchen, Emily stood sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up, frowning at the sight of him. As usual, they left at different times. The walk to school felt surreal. Each step felt easier, as if his body were more compact, stronger. Reaching campus, he saw Hunter and his cronies lounging near the school gates. Ben's first instinct was to avoid them, but something stopped him, an odd sense of confidence emanating from the tingling tattoo on his palm. Squaring his shoulders, he walked straight past them. Hunter caught sight of him. Well, if it isn't the piglet. Derek and Nick moved to block Ben's path. You gave us the slip yesterday. Ben's heart raced, but he stood firm, stating he didn't want trouble. Hunter scowled. He lunged forward and shoved Ben's shoulder. Only, Ben didn't topple. He barely moved at all. It felt as though Hunter's push bounced off him. A flicker of confusion flashed in Hunter's eyes. A small crowd began to gather, excited by the prospect of a confrontation. Sensing this, Hunter grabbed Ben by the collar with both hands, trying to yank him forward. Again, Ben planted his feet and braced, refusing to budge more than a few inches. An astonished hush fell over the bystanders. This time, Ben seized his chance. With a burst of courage, he shoved Hunter square in the chest, sending the bully stumbling back, nearly losing his balance. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nobody had ever seen Fat Ben stand up to Hunter like that. Phones appeared, cameras rolling. Hunter's face twisted with rage, but before he could charge again, a commanding shout echoed from the school entrance. "Enough!" Coach Reynolds roared. The crowd broke apart, running to avoid trouble. Hunter glared at Ben, then backed off, with Derek and Nick trailing behind. Ben stood there in disbelief. He'd done it. He had stood up for himself. Where did that strength come from? It was like the mark was absorbing his negative emotions and buffing him in return. When he reached first period English, Ms. Lee was teaching. Normally, Ben would avoid attention, but today he found himself raising his hand. Ms. Lee blinked in surprise. Ben rarely volunteered answers. A few classmates exchanged startled glances. As Ben finished speaking, he caught sight of Ashley at the front. She tossed her hair and shot him a glare that bristled with annoyance, then turned back to her phone with a dismissive shrug. Still, Ben felt a tiny spark of satisfaction flicker inside him. He had a confident voice, and for the first time in forever, he was using it. At lunch, instead of hiding in a corner, Ben carried his tray confidently. He spotted Ruby waving him over. She had an open seat next to her circle of friends. Normally, Ben would have panicked, but he found himself sliding into the seat. They chatted about weekend plans and the usual teenage gossip. Ruby's friend Marcy mentioned a trip to a nearby amusement park. Everyone was excited, except Ruby, who shifted uncomfortably. Ruby confessed she couldn't go, cheeks flushing as she admitted money was tight. Instantly, Ben reached into his pocket. He still had some leftover from skipping lunch the previous day. "Here," he said, offering her $40. "This should cover your ticket, right?" Ruby's eyes widened as she glanced between the money and Ben, questioning if he was sure. Ben smiled softly. "It's fine. If you need lunch or anything else, just let me know." Tina and the others exchanged glances. Impressed, Ruby beamed and impulsively gave Ben a quick side hug. Heat flashed across his cheeks at the contact, but he also felt a blossoming pride. Hunter and his crew were suspended for a week after footage was reviewed by the principal. With them gone, Ben felt freedom in the halls for the first time since he could remember. Classmates who had barely acknowledged him now greeted him in passing. Ruby grew more attached, leaning on him for small favors, borrowing a few dollars, finishing a homework problem, or letting her copy notes. Ben liked the attention, the normalcy of having friends around. He was still too flattered to notice the pattern. How many people always seem to forget their money when they were with him? At home, Emily noticed changes too. Ben was less passive, more outspoken. One evening, she tried her usual tactic, turning up the TV volume loud and drowning out his attempt to speak with her about chores. This time, he snatched the remote from her hand. She gaped for a moment before rolling her eyes. "Stop acting like you're someone important. It's annoying." He set the remote down, face calm. "And yet here you are noticing me. Maybe go back to ignoring me like you always do." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing and stalked off. Soon, a burning curiosity drew Ben back to the shrine. A week had passed since he found it, and woke up with the mark. He needed to learn the source of the confidence and power he was gaining. After school, he returned to the same area by slipping through the gap in the fence. Only something felt different this time. Every path seemed to loop him back to the same spot, no matter which direction he took. A creeping unease ran down his spine, as if the forest were trying to confuse him. Hidden among the trees, unseen by Ben, a pair of crimson eyes watched, smiling faintly at his frustration. After nearly an hour of searching, Ben gave up and trudged home, more questions than answers swirling in his mind. That night, he scoured local legends on the internet. He found only passing mentions of a weeping maiden ghost story in those woods, rumored to cry under the moonlight. Hardly helpful. Next morning, as he passed Ashley and her friends, he overheard them whisper, "He thinks he's so cool now." To his own surprise, he turned, smirked at them, and waved. One of the girls blushed and looked away, mortified that she'd been caught bad-mouthing him. Ashley rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful, but Ben merely walked off. Later that day, Ruby asked Ben if they could walk to the bus stop together after class. He felt a nervous excitement, wondering if this might be a transition from casual flirting to something more real. He waited by the school gate, checking his phone every few seconds. 10 minutes passed, 15, no sign of her. Growing worried, he went back inside to look for her. Passing a partially open classroom door, he froze at the sound of her voice inside. Marcy's voice answered. Ben inched closer, and his stomach twisted when he heard his name. "Just saying it's gross how he follows you around like a lost puppy," Marcy quipped. Ruby sighed. "He's not that bad, Marcy. He's fat, ugly, and desperate," Marcy cut in sharply. "You've been nice to him, but people are starting to think you actually like him. That's social death, you know." Ruby's voice dropped. "I know. He is fat and ugly. It's not like I enjoy hanging out with him. I was just trying to be nice, as he is paying for my stuff. He keeps taking it the wrong way." Marcy laughed. "Exactly. Use it to your advantage while you can. Let him buy you things, but you gotta pull back or he'll think you're dating. That's even more embarrassing." Something inside Ben broke. Each word stabbed his heart like a needle. He turned and left the building without a sound, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. He walked aimlessly, eventually collapsing onto a bench in a nearly empty park. "How could she?" Ben whispered to himself. "I thought she was different." The mark on his palm throbbed. A dark swirl of emotions coalesced inside him. In the end, nothing had truly changed. Even confidence wasn't enough when people judged him solely on looks. He went home that evening, ignoring Emily's half-hearted greeting. Locking himself in his room, he ignored the phone that buzzed with messages from unknown numbers. Maybe classmates who heard some rumor. He didn't care. He was done with them all. That night was a fever dream. He tossed and turned, sweat drenching his sheets. Each time he closed his eyes, he heard Ruby and Marcy's voices taunting him. The intense heartbreak made him forget about the mark, which was throbbing intensely. They only used you. Give in, or keep suffering. Each hateful whisper in his mind felt both external and intimately his own. By morning, he was exhausted. For a solid week, he skipped school under the pretense of being sick. Emily, begrudgingly worried, knocked on his door a few times, but he refused to answer. The world outside could burn for all he cared. But on the 7th morning, he awoke in a startling calm. The fever was gone. His mind felt strangely clear, albeit simmering with a quiet anger. He half-sleepingly got out of bed, noticing his body felt lighter, more energized. Running a hand through his hair, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror and froze. His reflection was different. The chubby, lumbering figure was replaced by something leaner, sharper around the jaw, the belly reduced. He looked as if he'd lost 50 pounds overnight, his face inches closer to the person he'd always yearned to be. Was he still dreaming? He pressed a hand against the cool glass. This time, he felt a rush of joy. The mark on his palm glowed softly, like it approved. "No," he whispered, swallowing hard. "This is real." He headed out of his room. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Emily. Her eyes flared wide in shock as she took in his transformed appearance. She remarked that he looked different. Ben shrugged casually. "Probably because I've barely eaten anything this week. Haven't really felt hungry," he said, heading off to school. And with that, he brushed past her and left the house, ignoring her startled expression. He didn't need Emily's approval, or anyone else's anymore. The walk to school was exhilarating. A new strength thrummed through his muscles. He tested it by jogging the last few blocks, barely winded when he arrived. Once on campus, heads turned. Girls who had never given him a second glance paused mid-laugh. Some even nudged their friends, pointing. Ben stopped by his locker, noticing how people watched him from the corner of their eyes. Meanwhile, his sister came in through the main entrance with her clique. One of her friends, a redhead named Allie, spotted Ben. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Who's that?" Emily realized they were all staring at her brother. The same brother she'd disowned socially for years. Now he looked like someone else entirely. Pride, embarrassment. She couldn't place the emotion coiling in her chest. "That's my brother," she mumbled, instantly regretting the admission. Her friends stared, teasingly asking since when she had a hot brother. Emily's face burned. Down the hall, Ben caught bits of their conversation. He heard someone say, "Emily's brother." Not that it mattered. He shut his locker and strolled to class. In first period homeroom, Miss Sandoval paused mid-sentence as Ben walked in. She hesitantly asked if she knew him. A classmate from the back spoke up. "That's Ben Harris." A ripple of whispered astonishment spread through the room. Sandoval raised her eyebrows. "Ben, She shook her head, collecting herself. "Take your seat, please." He sat in his usual spot. Ruby, seated one row over, looked anxious, scribbling on a slip of paper. She slid it onto his desk when Ms. Sandoval turned to the board. "Where have you been? You look amazing. Let's talk at lunch?" Ben's heart twisted at the sight of her handwriting. A few days ago, her words could have warmed him, but all he could think of now was the conversation he'd overheard. He offered her a small, non-committal smile, and her face lit with relief. Then he caught Ashley watching him from across the aisle. Her gaze flicked away the instant their eyes met, a faint pink tinge coloring her cheeks. Just as class finished, two figures appeared at the doorway, Hunter and his cousin Jake. Evidently, their suspension had ended. Hunter stepped directly in front of Ben, angrily challenging his newfound confidence. Jake rolled his shoulders, showing bruises from who knew what previous fight. Suddenly, Hunter lunged forward. The mark on Ben's palm flared. Lightning fast, Ben caught Hunter's wrist, twisting it. Hunter hissed in pain. Jake lunged forward, swinging a heavy textbook at Ben's head. Ben ducked just in time. Students scattered with screams, some filming on their phones. Jake charged again. Ben sidestepped and slammed a palm into Jake's ribs. Jake staggered, nearly toppling onto another row of desks, but came back swinging, pure rage in his eyes. He crashed into Ben, both of them tumbling over the chairs. Hunter freed from Ben's initial hold, snatched a metal chair and struck at Ben's back. Pain flared, but adrenaline kept Ben upright. He spun, yanked the chair away. With unnatural strength, he grabbed Hunter by the collar, lifting him clear off his feet and pinning him against the wall. Jake tried one last time to tackle Ben from behind, but Ben twisted at the last second, delivering an elbow to Jake's jaw. Jake crumpled to the floor, dazed. Hunter's eyes filled with fear as Ben pressed him harder against the wall, voice low. "Had enough?" Fear flashed in Hunter's eyes. "Fine," he muttered, shame burning his cheeks. "Let me go." Ben released him. The classroom stood in stunned silence. Nobody had expected this outcome. Without a word, Ben picked up his scattered belongings and walked out, leaving a hush of disbelief in his wake. As soon as the bell rang for break, the hallway burst into excited chatter. Students swarmed Ben, especially the girls, clamoring for details. "How did you do that? Have you been working out?" Ben felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with disorientation. He offered only vague answers. "Guess I'm stronger than I look." Finally, Ruby cut through the crowd, grabbing his hand. "Come on," she urged. "Let's go somewhere quieter." She led him to the cafeteria, weaving between tables until they reached a quieter corner. They joined the lunch line together. Ruby paid for both their meals, smiling shyly. "My treat," she said. They sat away from the usual cliques. Ruby leaned in, eyes full of curiosity and maybe a hint of longing. "You look incredible. And the way you handled Hunter and Jake." She shook her head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like it." Ben stared at her, recalling the words she had said to Marcy. Fat and ugly. The memory soured any sweetness he felt now. Still, he forced a small smile, letting her talk. In the days that followed, Ben found himself slipping deeper into the role of a campus hottie. A swirl of superficial friendships formed around him. At lunch, Ruby often offered to pay for his meals to repay him for all the times he had covered her. Yet ironically, Ben started to take advantage as well, asking her to complete entire projects for him, pick up extra errands, or retrieve things from the school store. She complied without complaint, almost eager to please him. A subtle arrogance crept into Ben's demeanor. He recognized it in himself, but didn't particularly care. If people wanted to revolve around him for once, let them. He'll make use of it. Ashley, meanwhile, had taken an unexpected interest in him. Once the queen bee who ridiculed him, she now found ways to bump into him in the hallway or linger near his table at lunch. Her face was a carefully crafted mask of mild disinterest, but her eyes showed curiosity. And then the day came when Ashley approached him in the cafeteria. Ruby was at his side as usual, Ashley ignored Ruby entirely, focusing on Ben with a smile that almost sparkled. "Hi, Ben," she purred. "Mind if I sit with you?" Ruby stiffened, glancing at Ben uncertainty, but Ben merely shrugged. "Sure." Ashley slid into the seat across from him. She launched into a speech about track tryouts, how she'd noticed his athletic potential. Ben stared, unimpressed. Finally, she lowered her voice like sharing a secret. "I'm throwing a party this weekend. A couples-only thing. Just some pair games, you know. Fun stuff." She smiled, eyes boring into Ben's. "I thought maybe you'd like to come with me." A hush fell around their table. Ruby's nails bit into the plastic tray. Ben leaned back, studying Ashley's face. Once he had admired her from afar. He remembered the day he complimented her outfit, and she called him a creepy loser. The memory of that humiliation shaping his words. "Interested?" he echoed softly. He glanced around the cafeteria, making sure they had an audience. Then his voice hardened. "Tell me, Ashley, were you planning on getting to know me before or after calling me a worthless loser?" Ashley's smile froze. Ben stood slowly. Her eyes flicked to the side, perhaps calculating an escape route. He placed his hands on the table, leaning in. "You think I've forgotten? Last year, right in this room, I complimented you. You and your friends laughed at me in front of everyone." Ashley's face turned pale beneath her makeup. "It was just a joke." "A joke," Ben repeated, letting out a short laugh. "Funny, I wasn't laughing. Let's be clear, you don't actually care about me. You just can't stand that I'm getting attention you think you deserve." Ashley tried to stand, but Ben slammed his hands on the table, causing her to flinch and sink back. "You want me at your party? Maybe pretend to be your boyfriend? Let me be absolutely clear. I wouldn't be caught dead with someone like you." A collective "ooh" rippled through the cafeteria. Whispers and excited giggles followed, everyone relishing the social drama. Ashley's eyes brimmed with tears of humiliation. "You jerk," she spat. Ben stepped aside, letting her stagger up. She looked around desperately, searching for a lifeline, but found none. "Whatever," she hissed. "Your loss." She shoved through the crowd, hurrying away with little watery eyes. Ruby watched with a stunned expression. When the dust settled, Ben grabbed his bag, ignoring the stares. Ruby followed him out of the cafeteria, looking torn between admiration and unease. After last period, Ruby tracked Ben down near the school's oak tree. Ruby tugged at Ben's sleeve. "Can we talk? Alone?" He followed her behind the oak where it was quieter. The tension in her voice put him on edge. She fiddled with her skirt's hem, eyes flicking up to meet his. "After what I saw today, Ashley throwing herself at you, it made me realize something," she began softly. "Ben, I have feelings for you, real feelings. I'm sorry if I ever acted otherwise." Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. "I know I might not deserve it, but I'm hoping we can." She trailed off, waiting for him to respond. The old Ben might have felt his heart leap, might have embraced her with teary gratitude, but the memory of her conversation with Marcy was still too raw, and the new Ben had no interest in being played again. "Sorry, Ruby," he said. "I'm just not interested." Her eyes flared with shock. "But I thought we had something special." "You thought?" Ben asked lightly. Then his gaze darkened. "Do you remember the night your car broke down on Highway 6? You called me at midnight crying. I came right away." Ruby sniffled, nodding frantically. "I remember. You saved me. I was so grateful." "You also called me your hero," he said, bitterness threading his voice. "But do you remember what you said to your friends behind the science wing? You called me fat, ugly, just an errand boy, easy to manipulate." Ruby flinched as though slapped. "I used you recently too, Ruby. Having you run errands, do my homework, basically jump at my every request. Now we're even, right?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Ben, please, I was stupid. I never..." "Save it." He turned away, shoulders tense. "I don't need fake friends anymore." She reached out to grab his wrist, but he pulled back. Her tears fell harder. "Ben, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go like this." The look on his face silenced her. In the hush, he could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. Some part of him ached with regret. Without another word, he strode across the grass, leaving her trembling and tear-stained. He felt the brand on his palm pulsate with terrifying intensity, fueling a dark sense of satisfaction and something else, a pang of emptiness. As he cut across the school's front lot, everything seemed to blur. By the time he registered his surroundings, he found himself once more in the overgrown clearing with the statue. Panic flared. How had he gotten here? A single pair of hands clapped slowly in the gloom. Ben's heart lurched as he spun around, searching for the source. The statue of the sorrowful woman now stood before him in living flesh, stepping down gracefully from the altar. She was slender, with long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, wild and hungry. Ben staggered back, voice tight, asking, "Who is she?" She laughed softly. "Oh, my dear Ben, who is the wrong question." Her voice seemed to echo from multiple throats at once, a voice of a woman, a girl, maybe even a child. He realized he was trembling, the mark on his palm scorching now. Her lips twisted into a mischievous smile. "Your kind calls us demons." She dipped into a mock curtsy. "Call me Lilith. I am older than your pitying gods, a primal demon that feeds on desire and greed." Ben felt cold dread coil in his stomach. You gave me this mark." Lilith prowled closer, each step graceful as a dancer's. You came here, kneeling before my statue, filled with despair so thick I could taste it. You asked for strength. I gave it to you." Her hand caressed his left palm, and the brand flared. Memories of his humiliations exploded in his mind. He felt the swirl of shame and anger. Lilith's gaze flickered with delight. "You were drowning in self-loathing, dear Ben. And humans in that state are so easy to control. Now, your desires are unleashed. How does it feel to be admired and feared at last?" Ben clenched his teeth. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted people to stop hurting me." Lilith chuckled. "And they did stop. Your deepest wish, to be strong, to no longer be the victim. But as with all gifts, a price must be paid." A creeping sense of foreboding gripped him. "What price?" She tilted her head. "That remains to be seen, my dear." Ben, recalling the times the mark flared whenever he felt anger or pride. Had he slowly been losing himself? Lilith leaned in. "Your heartbreak, your rage, it tastes exquisite. I can make you stronger still. I can feed you power until you can bend the entire school, this entire town, to your will." She traced a finger under his chin. "But be warned, sweet mortal. The more you devour, the more you hunger. Are you ready for that?" He thought about Hunter lying bruised on the floor, Ashley fleeing in tears, Ruby sobbing under the oak. Was this who he wanted to be? He opened his mouth, but no words formed. Lilith laughed, a sound thick with triumph. She leaned in until her lips brushed against his ear. "I'll be watching, dear Ben. Don't disappoint me." Ben jerked awake to the shrill beeping of his alarm clock. He blinked at the ceiling. That encounter, Lilith, had it all been a dream? He scrambled upright and glanced at his palm. The tattoo was growing. His hands trembled. It had been real. The more you devour, the more you hunger. At school, a charged atmosphere awaited him. Students eyed him with a blend of awe, suspicion, and a bit of fear. After all, he had thrashed Hunter and Jake in front of an entire class. Ben moved through the crowded hallway in a daze. Near the vending machines, he spotted Hunter lingering awkwardly, clearly hesitant about approaching him. Hunter opened his mouth, as if wanting to say something, but words wouldn't come. Ben sighed, irritated by the awkwardness. "What? If you've got nothing to say, piss off." Hunter's jaw tightened, then stepped aside without another word. That afternoon, Lily, who had once tried to help clean off the spilled lunch from Ben's shirt, approached him. She was one of the few who seemed genuinely concerned. She shyly crossed her arms, asking Ben if they could talk. He nodded. They found an empty stretch of hallway near the library. She fiddled with the straps of her backpack. "Everyone's talking about you, about how you've changed. She took a breath, meeting his eyes. "Are you okay?" Her question caught him off guard. Most people asked for favors, not if he was all right. He managed to say he was fine. She nodded slowly. "You don't have to tell me details, but if you ever want to hang out or talk about anything, I'm here." There was an earnestness in her voice that tugged at something deep in his chest. Ben felt an urge to confide in Lily, to unload the horror of his predicament, but fear of sounding insane and of dragging her into this darkness held him back. He forced a small smile. "Thanks, Lily." Her face lit with relief. She gave a little wave and disappeared into the crowd. In the evening, Ben returned home to find Emily perched on the living room couch. She rarely confronted him like this, so he paused warily in the doorway. "What?" he asked, removing his sneakers. She turned off the TV. "So, you beat up Hunter. Words all over school." He shook his head, saying the guy deserved it. She frowned, tapping her nail on the remote. "I don't care that you beat him up, but you realize you're making a scene, right? Now everyone's talking about you, which means they're talking about us." A hint of her old scorn flickered across her features. Ben's anger rose as he bitterly reminded her she'd spent years hiding their relationship. Emily flushed. "You don't get it. My social life, your social life," Ben repeated mockingly. "That's more important than literally anything else. Well, guess what? I won't be your dirty little secret anymore." She stood. "Mom and Dad told me to look after you, but you're just making everything worse. First, you vanished for a week. Now you're acting like some pumped-up jerk. This isn't you." He laughed bitterly. "Isn't it? Maybe I'm finally fed up." He stalked toward the stairs. "You never cared before, so don't pretend now." Emily opened her mouth to retort, but he was already gone. That night, Ben dreamed of Lilith again. She stood at the shrine, beckoning him closer. "What do you want?" Ben demanded in the dream. Lilith's lips curved into a predatory grin. "I want you to embrace what you're becoming. You can have revenge, power, everything you've ever desired. You need only ask." He jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The next day at school, despite Ben's harsh rejection, Ashley seemed determined to salvage her position. She planned her couples-only party anyway, and rumors spread fast that it was going to be huge. But word reached Ben through Ruby. Ruby, still on shaky terms with Ben, approached him sheepishly the day of the party. "Ashley insisted I bring you," she said. "She claims you're cool now, and you'll attract attention. I know you don't like her, but..." Ben arched an eyebrow. He wasn't sure which was more annoying, that Ashley had the gall to invite him after their confrontation, or that Ruby was still acting like his messenger. "Is that right?" he drawled. Ruby nervously apologized, suggesting he come along to show everyone he wasn't bothered by the drama, mentioning Lily would be there too. At the mention of Lily's name, he hesitated. Lily had been genuinely kind. Maybe if she were there, he'd have someone normal to talk to. Part of him also relished the chance to show Ashley up on her own turf. "All right," he finally said. The mansion was as lavish as rumored. Music throbbed through the air as clusters of teenagers laughed, flirted, and danced. Heads turned as he walked in. Ashley glided forward, greeting him with a practiced smile. "Ben, you made it." She looped an arm through his, ignoring the tension between them. He stepped back, forcing her to release him. "Don't push your luck." She laughed airily, though her cheeks colored. "Right, well, enjoy the party. Drinks and food in the kitchen. And my room is on the first floor," she chuckled. Ruby approached hesitantly, raising her cup in thanks, trying to meet Ben's gaze. He replied indifferently that he might not stay. A hum of conversation broke out as people noticed him. Some admired his new look. Others whispered behind how he had nearly crushed Hunter. In the far corner, Lily stood, awkwardly nursing a can of soda herself. She brightened when she saw Ben and waved him over. "Hey, I wasn't sure if you'd come." He smiled faintly, admitting uncertainty about being there, but glad to see a friendly face. She gestured to the crowd. Ashley's typical crowd. Models, jocks, some random kids hoping for clout. "I'm out of place, but I came with a friend who just left me to flirt with some senior. So, I'm basically alone." She laughed, a bit wryly. Ben felt an odd protectiveness toward Lily. They chatted for a bit, sipping sodas, sharing stories. Her warmth and sincerity reminded him that life wasn't all betrayal. Suddenly, the music cut off. Heads turned. Standing in the living room doorway was Hunter. Ashley hurried to Hunter, greeting him quickly and checking if he was okay. His gaze locked on Ben. Everyone knew about their feud. Lily stepped closer to Ben, eyes wide with concern. Hunter insisted he wasn't looking for trouble. Ben folded his arms, urging him to speak. Hunter glanced around, noticing the phone's recording. "You made a fool of me. I don't deny I deserved some of it." He paused, frustration etched on his features. "I'm done with you. I'm calling it quits before someone gets seriously hurt." A ripple of surprise ran through the onlookers. This was not the outcome they expected. Ben's anger flared, spurred on by the mark. "You started this." "I know I did," Hunter snapped. "But I was never out to kill you. I was just... No, it doesn't matter. I've got bigger problems at home, so I'll keep my distance." There was a trembling sincerity in Hunter's voice that pricked at Ben's conscience. Lily placed a hand on Ben's arm, voice soft. Maybe it's time to end this, Ben." Meanwhile, Ben wavered, the two halves of himself at war. He could hear Lilith's voice in his head. "Crush him. Show no mercy. That is the only way." Suddenly, thunder rumbled outside. The overhead lights blinked again, plunging the mansion into near darkness for several heartbeats. Then the lights returned, dimmer than before. Before anyone could speak, a figure appeared in the open door. Drenched by the rain, wearing a thin black dress, stood the demon girl. Ben's heart lurched in horror. "Lilith," he breathed. She had crossed into the mortal world, no longer bound to the shrine's clearing. Her eyes scanned the room. "What a delightful gathering," she purred. "May I come in?"